Alright, so what all do we need to make this thing nice and camouflaged like how we just saw earlier? Well, first thing we're going to need, the paints you're going to want. So these 5 are typically what I use. We got 2 different kinds of green, 2 different kinds of brown, and a black, just to add a little bit of accent flair to it. Some masking tape, and a nice sharp razor blade. Lastly, what we're going to need is something to add the texture to it to make it kind of mimic how Kryptek is. A laundry bag. So you just kind of want to make a little incisions, some holes in it. Give it a little bit more breakup, not so uniform, because you don't want anything to be too uniform, especially in nature. Nothing's really super uniform. So the better of a breakup you have, the better you'll do. You'll see how we get to it, but this isn't until the second cut that we're going to put on there. And here's how we're going to do that. Alright, so we have our rifle here, and the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get the masking tape. We're going to want to cover up everything, like the window on the mag, if we care about that. We're going to want to cover up all the numbers on the optic, pretty much anything on the turret mounts, anything that's a number. We're going to want to cover that with masking tape to keep it from getting covered. You primarily just want to cover up the parts on the optic that give you information or tell you how to dial it in. Equally as such, you're going to want to cover up little things like this in the window if you care about that. And you always want to have a magazine in here for when you're doing this. That way you don't get any paint up inside your mag well or inside your action. Alright, I got everything here that I really want taped up now. Another thing that you want to consider is if you don't have scope caps, you're going to want to obviously put a wad of paper in there and cover that up with tape too, so you don't get any paint inside of your scope on your optic. You obviously don't want that, you'll ruin it. Let's get to the painting part of it, shall we? So a lot of people, when they do this, they just lay it down and they just cover it, and then they flip it once that dries, and then they cover it. I ain't got time for that, so I hang mine from the ceiling in the garage, and then I do my base layer and everything like that. Speaking of base layers, I might have already mentioned this already via post edit, but when you do this, at least the way I do it, I know Steph does it differently, but when I do it, I always do the lightest color first, which for me is going to be this Coyote Tan. This is what my whole base layer is going to be in, and then I'm going to go from lightest all the way up to darkest. So that's how I'm going to do this. That includes going through the switching between tans, greens, and browns, and then to the black. We're not going to stick with just one hue and then switch whenever that color becomes lighter or not. It's going to be lightest to darkest, period. Right, so we're pretty good. Paint's pretty thin. We'll get that later. Now when you do this, you don't want to just layer it on. You want to just really gently, just a little bit at a time. Just like that. That's it. We don't need to go hog wild on it. We don't need to make the whole thing match immediately. We'll get there in time. We're just going to make sure we get every last little bit, especially on the base layer, that we can here. Also, if you have a collapsible stock, make sure it's extended all the way. Now the easiest way to tell when this stuff is starting to dry, which by the way I should mention, we are using matte paints. You want to make sure you're using matte. If you're using anything with gloss, oh man, good luck hiding in the woods of gloss. But how you can tell whenever it's actually starting to dry is right through here. You can see it's already starting to dry because it's starting to become matte. The gloss is starting to go away off of it. It's not as shiny anymore. So once all this shininess starts to go away, you're good to go on your next coat. But this again is where I am different from a lot of people when it comes to how I paint my rifle. So right here where it's starting to dry, because of how I do my texturing, I'm going to start adding the second color already. Now for this layer, we're not going to coat everything, okay? We're just going to go through sectional, or just add spots to it sectionally. You can add tiger stripe, you can add small stripes, you can add feathering, you can add blotches, you can add where you want. That's what makes it so great, it's yours. I want to go through and hit up certain spots of it, kind of wrapping around it a little bit. I don't want to make it too obvious what I'm doing here. I just want to go over spots that just stick out to me that I'm like, yeah, I should probably put something there, or I should put something there. That right there is about all the more we're gonna do to it, I think. With this, that's about it. That's all the more we're gonna be doing with it. Just little bits like that. And we're gonna move on to the next one. We're gonna move on to our next latest, which is gonna be this earth brown. So we just went satin, green, brown, and then we're gonna go back to a green, and we're gonna go to black. Alright, so once again, we don't want to go heavy with the darker ones. We just want little bits of accent to it. Nothing crazy. That's the point of the darker ones. The darker ones are for breaking it up. You want to make it come into its own much more with the darker ones. So now that, right there, that's where I'm going to stop with the base layer. And you can stop here too, if you really wanted to. You could stop right here. However, this is where we're going to get into the textured side of things. Now like I said, you can stop here with just some natural colors. You can add in a little bit of black to it too. The black helps break it up more, but you don't want to add like much black at all. And you want to do it from very, very far away, unless you're trying to stick out and be eccentric, which we're not trying to do. We're trying to blend in. So with all the other ones, I was about here spraying with it. For this one, I'm going to be way back here, and you'll see why here in just a second. See this? I don't know why I spun it. So with black, we want to make it a little bit darker on top. So from back here, we're just going to, probably like right there on the scoop. Yep, that's enough. That little bit is enough. Down there on the stalk, we'll put some. Right there we'll dot some. Dot some over here, right there. Tiny touch on the top. And that's it. That's it for the black. We're going to move on to the full texturing part. And this, as if everything wasn't already completely different from how Steph and I do it already, this is where it gets vastly different from how him and I do it. So now we're going to get our laundry bag that's all cut up and torn up in certain ways. And we're going to drape it over certain portions of this. And this is why I did it without it being dry, because that's going to add a little bit of a smear to it and break up its pattern more. The important thing with that is, though, is you don't want to remove the layers you already put on. You just want to add a little bit of a smear to it, make it all blend in a little bit more with itself. You don't want it to break away with that paint and stand out and have the black showing again. We're going to go back to our base layer. We're going to do everything the same way we just did it again. And the texture of this that comes out of here is way better than what you think. Now we're not going to be adding the whole base layer back. We're going to be doing this the same way we just did it before with all the other colors, not the base layer. Yes, this is the base layer color, but we are not using this as a base layer anymore. We are now using this to accentuate it and break it up more. So how you want to do it now is where you have darker spots, you're going to want to hit it with the lighter stuff and vice versa. And you don't need a lot. You don't need a lot at all. And that's going to be it for down there with this. And then we're going to move back on over to this, to the lighter green. And we're going to add that back on. Again, we're going to go after the darker spots and lighten them up a little bit again. And when we're done, you'll see why. Okay. That's it. And then we're going to move back over to the dark earthy green, earthy brown. And now with this one, we're going to chase after the lighter spots on the base. Now with this part of it, we aren't adding any black. We don't want to add a single bit of black to this. The black is already on the bottom, and it's already going to be breaking it up. So now, before this fully dries onto there, we're going to take this off. We're going to let it rub some of that into there. And again, make it more unique. Its own pattern. Oh yeah, look at that. Right there you see a texture pattern coming out in it. It's nice and broken up the whole way through it, especially there on the optic. Down there in the bottom of the receiver, you can see it pretty good. And it's like that on the back too. And right here, right at the bottom of that foregrip, is where we stopped. So now you can see how much different that texturing makes everything. Like I said, you could stop where you were before and go on from there, or you could continue to make it more of your rifle and more of something that suits you and your environment. So once again, we're going to want to go after darker spots with the lighter stuff and the lighter spots with the darker stuff. You can once again take this off. Look at the texture breakup. Wow, look at that texture breakup. That's good. And now we're gonna let this hit here and dry. And we'll come back and look at it about an hour.